What's up, everybody? Welcome back in. It's another edition of the First and Orange podcast. Parker Gabriel here, Luca Evans there. Don't worry, we're not trying to do a live Q&A as we did in spectacular failing fashion on Friday. This is just a normal post-game podcast after the Broncos had a Sunday performance that I would say sort of like mirrored our Friday attempt at a Q&A. Like it wasn't there was plenty of things to iron out week 1 to week 2, but ultimately they got the job done. They beat Tennessee 20-12, dominant defensive outing, as I'm sure we'll talk about more. Shaky stuff from the offense, but some signs down the stretch from the running game, and Bo Nix turned the ball over 3 times, just the second time in his young career. So, Luca, when you think back to your first regular season game at Empower Field, where does your mind go first on this game that will not be, called a masterpiece by any stretch, except for maybe for Vance Joseph?
Well, I'll say on the theme of us really kind of digesting, what works and incorporating it here. I would say, we're getting back to the ground game, keeping it simple,
keeping it simple.
No real complicated formations, no live chat, kind of nonsense where this is, where it's simple, inside zone, outside zone. We're getting back to the basics, easy pod. I think really, and Sean Payton said it today in kind of his Monday call with us, but, he felt kind of in the first half against the Titans that, as a play caller, they were leaning a little bit too hard into kind of letting the defense dictate, what they were doing offensively. And obviously, they called some RPOs that, maybe favored the run, and then ended up, Bo Nix ended up calling out of it, and they ended up calling out of it. And then you ended up with a crazy kind of run pass distribution. And then in the second half, things really started to break through in the running game. I thought kind of the two-headed nature of the J.K. Dobbins and R.J. Harvey pairing what ended up pretty solid. I'd imagine you kind of see that distribution start to change a little bit because JK 16 carries, RJ had 7.
Yeah,
you're going to see that change over the course of the year. But for the most part, and you're going to have games like that when you commit to the run where it doesn't work for 2 or 3 quarters, and then you start to break through. And so I thought that was kind of an encouraging sign when I look back at it. The main thing I think I'll remember from this is really just how many times you kind of sat back after a play from Bo Nix and went, it's one game. Titans pass defense is actually really good. They were second in the NFL last year in passing yards per game. But when you take a look back, the numbers, the tape, he was 2 of 7 against pressure for 8 yards, 2 picks. That was a big deficiency of his last year, and it's just not an encouraging sign to start the year struggling as much kind of when the pocket is collapsing against a base rush like this. And especially throwing on the move, some of the decisions there. So I don't know. I mean, he obviously took plenty of accountability. This team has faith in him. Sean Payton has faith in him. But what did you make, after watching Bo all of last year in kind of week 1?
Yeah, I just thought, early on last season, obviously his first starts as a rookie in the NFL were pretty rough.
Yep.
But he just played such a long stretch of good football from basically like week 5 onward, or, midway through week 5 onward. And then he had a little turnover spate late in the season. And that turnover spate and Cleveland, that was kind of what it looked like. Those games are a little bit what it looked like on Sunday, where it wasn't like he was totally fooled or he didn't know where to go with the ball. He had the miss that he acknowledged after the game he'll want back on the 4th and 8, where they ran the deep crossers and he threw it for Mims and Sutton was wide open. But, overall, I thought, he always you almost always sort of feel like he's about to make a play, even when it doesn't come. And he did some of that obviously yesterday. But overall, there were some things that I don't quite know what to make of. And that's like, we're obviously not in meetings. You don't know exactly what, is happening, ins and outs, down to down. But like, there was a couple times I noticed early in the game where they used the back, motion from the back to like identify coverage. And they got like pretty clear man signals, like Cody Barton would run with a running back out of the backfield.
Right.
And then it still was sort of like the ball went to Cortland Sutton in tight coverage, and there wasn't much more to the play than that. And you're sort of like, what was if you get a clear signal, like, and then don't do anything with it, like there's stuff in there where I'm just like not quite sure what to make of it. And obviously the distribution run pass was out of whack early in the game. So overall, like, you can find good things. It wasn't a full on disaster. And I would probably be slower to this is actually a big problem for Bo Nix punch than maybe some others will be. I don't think there'll be a huge overreaction, but yeah, I mean, it's a good defense. It was a disruptive front. I mean, one of the clearest takeaways from the game is like, wow, Jeffrey Simmons is really good.
He was good. And frankly, I don't know if this had any actual pull, but he kind of baited Bo Nix into, for all the first read discourse, I think Bo Nix should have run the ball more than he did, or tucked it and run. The problem came when he was actually going through his second and third read and then just trying to force something. But yeah, to your point, he was great.
Yeah, it's interesting because, Bo Nix, I think Davis Webb talked about this last year with Bo in terms of like the best point guards in basketball are you stress the defense when you're downhill, right? Like you get toward the basket, you make the defense do something, and then you're either, scoring or distributing the ball and whatever. And they talk about a similar concept with quarterback play and with Bo Nix about when you are moving toward the line of scrimmage, up in the pocket, you are stressing the defense. You're making somebody make a decision about whether to come to you and then distributing the ball or taking off and running. And like the first two drives of the game, he was really good on the run, moving up, and then taking what was there. Like the first drive until the delay of game penalty in the red zone, the first drive was really good. And the second drive wasn't half bad either. And so like they were actually in rhythm early in the game, I thought, but the turnovers and penalties hurt him. And I just it didn't feel like, it felt like he was making a point of trying to keep his eyes down the field and throw it when he would move up. And that's fine, but at some level, he's such a good athlete that like you want him in those situations taking off and running too, if there's not an easy play down the field. So, easy for me to say, obviously, but that was I just thought he was sort of like a hitter in baseball that was a little bit in between the fastball and the off speed. Like, and if he got in the moments when he got in a rhythm, it looked pretty good. But when he was out of rhythm, there were some, bad swings, to sort of finish the analogy.
I also think I don't think the operation helped him in any sense. And maybe, this is partly on him. Maybe this is partly on Sean Payton. And, and Sean kind of pushed back, when post game, when talking about, he didn't feel like there's a lot operationally. Obviously, one delay a game, but when you watch those first few drives, like I remember there's one formation where a couple receivers just line up on the completely wrong side, and Bo has to motion them all the way over to the other side so that they're in trips. And another play where the play where Bo literally hands to the wrong side of J.K. Dobbins or this or that, and then it just blows up so badly that he runs right into a strip sack. Like, I think that made him look worse than he did. And at first, like, he was handling that chaos pretty well, like, to your point, and then things just kind of devolved from there a little bit. So I do think there's there's kinks just in Bo's pre-snap process. There's kinks in the play calling. There's probably some, and again, not having kind of gone back and fully digested things, probably some kinks in the offensive line too, that, is struggling so much with just kind of the, base rush that Tennessee had. But yeah, I mean, overall, and frankly, I mean, this wasn't a big issue, I thought, but I don't really think any receivers separated deep consistently
Nope.
at all that game. Just as a kind of another factor. So just a few, just a messy kind of first passing game debut of the year
It
from
was,
Jerry.
and I mean, we touched on it a little bit, but I think the Tennessee defense, like Tennessee might not be very good this year, but I do think they're going to give a lot of teams issues. I mean, Simmons and Joseph Day and even the big kid Tavondre Sweat, like up front. You know, L'Jarius Sneed, we talked about this last week, like was hurt a lot last year, but Sneed and Amani Hooker in the back end, that's like a pretty good starting point for a secondary, obviously. And so, like, yeah, they did a good job, I think, also of creating their own havoc. And anytime you have interior pressure, like you said, you know, Bo Nix didn't have very good numbers, was near the bottom of the league ranking wise against pressure last year, but he just wasn't pressured very often. And so you can sort of navigate around that. I don't know. I haven't looked to see exactly where the pressure rate checked in last night. He only got sacked once, but it did feel like he was under duress or getting out of the pocket more regularly, obviously, than just like one sack and 41 dropbacks. So there's that. And all of that sort of like, you know, influences. I thought, you know, Sean was interesting today talking about why they didn't get to the run much early in the game. You know, he said they had more passes than runs in the opener, but also, you know, what it sounded like he was saying was that Tennessee, when they got looks that were, you know, potential RPO, you know, basically that they were setting their defense to try to get the Broncos into passes. Like that's what it sounded like, that they were too often letting Tennessee dictate by their look, you know, checking out of a run play and into a pass play, or giving, you know, Bo Nix a read on a RPO or a zone read that has a pass tag on it, like to pull it and throw the ball. And so, you know, that was Sean's explanation for it. I mean, obviously the numbers were way out of whack. That would have had to happen several times in the first half for it to get that skewed. But in the second half, I mean, you saw some signs. Obviously, RJ Harvey hit the big one, you know, the 50-yard run. But just in general, they were a little bit, you know, that the offensive line, I think, leaned on Tennessee a little bit as the game went along. And I think they had 95 rushing yards in the fourth quarter, which, like, protecting a lead, you know, when you're nursing a lead, a 1-point lead or an 8-point lead, rushing for 95 yards in the fourth quarter
It's
is
a good
very
thing.
good.
And yeah, and the
Being
fact
on two
that
fourth downs is not a good thing, but rushing for 95 yards is a good thing.
yeah, the fact that RJ Harvey on the fifth carry of his NFL career breaks a longer one than any single Broncos back had at any point last season. That's a fun little stat. So yeah, that went well. And that yeah, what do you make of the 4th and 8, you know, late play call that nearly gave Tennessee a window to get back in it? Because in hindsight, you know, obviously that's you know, Sean Payton said like he has faith in the
Yeah,
call. He got
yeah,
cover 0. Like it would have hit, to your point, if Bo had identified Court maybe, but it seemed like the read was to Marvin for sure. I mean, I think in that, like, to me, that almost hints a little bit that you don't really trust Jeremy Crawshaw fully to, like, pin a punt, you know, with it, you know, instead of
yeah.
taking it back to the 20. But yeah, that was an interesting,
I
that
have
was an
what's
interesting
I
moment.
have what's probably something of a hot take on this. In the moment, like while we were going through it, I was along the lines of where I think most people were, which is like, what on earth are you doing going for it here on 4th and 8? It's not 4th and 2. It's not 4th and 4. It's 4th and 8 at the 36. I think ultimately probably the field goal is the bet. Like, you know, Sean pretty clearly, I mean, you know, they had a winner, 35-yard winner blocked in Kansas City last year. Had a kick, Kansas City blocked a kick the year before that too, Justin Reed off the edge, although he was offsides on that one. But that, you know, the point stands. Like, and it happened to him, like Justin Simmons did it to him in New Orleans, you know, when Justin played for the Broncos. And so, like, it seems like it's, I don't mean fear in like you're scared way, but I feel like it's sort of the block kick boogeyman certainly like loomed larger in Sean's
Yeah.
mind than like what the stats would tell you the odds are of a kick getting blocked and run back. Like look, in a vacuum,
Yep.
failing on fourth down and then having a guy fall down in coverage and giving up a touchdown when you give the ball back is more likely, I have to imagine,
Yes.
than like a kick block return for a touchdown.
Yep.
So,
But I mean, if you're weighing those two, like that's such clear and kind of incredible / insane maybe, but warranted faith in your defense at that point. If you're, if you're like, well, this might not work, we'll give them the ball back. They're not going to score.
They're not going down the field. Yeah, and for sure. I mean, and like very obviously the decision matrix would have been a lot different if it was, if it was a 2-point game. And maybe even if it was a 6-point game. I mean, you're still talking about, Tennessee has to do something they haven't done the entire game, which is go down the field and score a touchdown. And then also they have to get the 2-point conversion. So like, I think where I ended up on it is I'm not sure I'm not sure I entirely agree, but I actually I can see how they got to the decision. And like I'll give Sean that. I totally get not punting. Some of it's Crawshaw, some of it's just because like the risk, given how dominant the defenses had been, like, they didn't really need for the entire game. They didn't need Tennessee backed up to get a stop.
Yep.
And if the ball goes in the end zone, you're only gaining 16 yards in field position. So like, I understand that. And so I actually sort of came out on it where I wasn't quite as befuddled after watching it back and thinking it through after the game as I was. I mean, it's still like, if they would have scored, he would have got crushed for it, even though that's like in reality, like, everybody says process, not results, but like it's a results business. So it was definitely a roll of the dice. I can see where they were coming from in going forward. And frankly, like, had all the makings of a walk-in touchdown. Even Marvin had a step and has shown he can go up and get the ball with a defender in the area. So like, it wasn't just, it could have been a conversion and a walk-in touchdown if he saw court. It was also like, probably should have completed the ball to Marvin too.
I was quite literally making my way down to the post-game press conference at this point, and then I was like, hang on.
Wait a second.
What just happened? I should stay around for a second. Speaking of the defense, I think we should touch on that. I mean, to me, probably one of my biggest and it's obvious, but it feels like it's happening with Nick Bonito. You know what I mean? Like it's like it's just like it's a convert. You have the extension. You have this like the thing with him is he's, you go back and talk to his coaches and you look back at his trajectory, like he's gotten better at football basically every single year of his career since he was in high school. And, he's 250 now. He just signed, the Nike deal, and then he comes out and he just pretty much dominates this game, like 9 pressures. He made, obviously the knock on him always, and Sean even acknowledged it this week, like he knows teams are going to run it in one direction with him and Jonathan Cooper. They're going to run it in his direction. He comes, he makes 2 TFLs, like a number of really nice plays. Like it just seems like, obviously he made the leap last year, but the leap to like being a truly elite edge guy is happening.
Yeah.
Like that type of star.
It's so interesting. There's a lot of things about Tennessee's that we could do a whole podcast on, like all of the things that Tennessee did that you just have no concept of an idea of like why they did them.
Yeah.
Bad day at the office for Brian Callahan.
Really bad day.
But one of the things I just like didn't understand, like first play of the game, like you know exactly what Sean said. Like teams run at Nick Bonito. Where teams get in trouble is when they run away from Nick Bonito. not just because that generally means you're running at Jonathan Cooper, who's a really good edge guy, but also because like Bonito's calling card in the run game is the backside. Like he's a banshee off
Pursuit.
the backside, in pursuit. And both of the plays that he made, the 2 TFLs in the run game were them deciding, let's run it Cooper's side.
Yep.
And then Bonito, runs it down from the back. And so like some of that stuff, and you can't run to one side the whole game. I understand that, but like first play of the game and all of that. The thing about Bonito, I had this conversation with Zach Allen during training camp, and Zach was talking about how it's one thing to be good and it's one thing to win your one-on-ones and all of that, but that the sort of like true next level is using the early part of the game to set up a move when you really need it. And just he said, there's not very many guys in the league at any given time that are guys who truly, when you need a play, a guy can do it. And I thought it was sort of fitting that out of 6 sacks from 6 different guys, Bonito's was the 3rd and goal from the 4, the closest Tennessee got to scoring. And frankly, like Jonathan Cooper, had the initial pressure and forced, Cam Ward sort of like to stop in his tracks and try to get back. And then Bonito was there. But like, Bonito finishing that drive, I mean, that's sort of like what you're talking about when you're like, yeah, this is the guy, like, and that to me, like that was out of many, flashes from Bonito, that play sort of signified his status of like, yeah, there's a lot of really good players. Pat's obviously the best player on the defense, but like, this is a closer. And he showed that last year too, with the pick sixes and the big plays late in games down the stretch.
Yeah. And Pat even made the point yesterday, like he has so much trust. He made the point, like there's a play call and there's 1 or 2 seconds, like he's expecting Nick to get there. And he showed it yesterday. Like he beat, Tennessee's left tackle all game, speed rush, this or that. And to your point with Zach, I think Nick this offseason, talking with his trainer, like that was one thing. That was kind of the main focus of his offseason, was developing the counters. Like his trainer's point was like, this is the year that you see, every pass rusher is known for a signature move in one way or the other. And Nick's is obviously, just his pure kind of speed and bend and that sort of thing. But like, this is the year that you're going to see a signature move from him. And it's almost, it's like you're honing this concept of how do you make your initial move by, a certain point in the game? How do you make an initial move look exactly like a counter move to where all of a sudden you're able to, it's almost like how a pitcher, in baseball is able to like make a pitch look out of the hand exactly, as like an off-speed fastball slider, what have you. And so I think you're starting, exactly. So I think you're starting to see that, with Nick Bonito. And then, to touch on Pat, I mean, shoot, I just like, as someone who's never seen him play before, I feel like I did not see him play a football game just now, which is like as high, as good of a testament as you can have, just completely rendered like his side of the field invisible essentially. And
it's sort of funny because he's like, if you spent a whole game and you just watched him, you would marvel at his ability, and you also just like wouldn't see much of the game because the ball's going away from him so much. It's always funny, like somewhere second or third quarter, I think it was probably in the second quarter. I don't think it was all the way in the second half, but at some point in the second quarter, I was like, oh yeah, Calvin Ridley, and I looked and he had the one catch that they motioned him away from Pat, and there was one of the rare times when Surtain, sort of stayed, and Ridley was able to get away from him, and they threw it to him, and then Riley, blew up the play in the flat, and so, I mean, he just like Surtain. It's hard to appreciate when you watch on TV, because it's not a guy who's even picking up a blitz, which you can see, from a running back, like it just is. But he does it every week, and just when you say like, well, it'd be really hard for him to have a better year overall than he had last year, like he pitches a shutout in week 1 against a really good receiver. So like that's just, it sort of gives you a flavor, and then the fact that, I think you tweeted a stat about, 8 targets against Riley Moss and he gave up 26 or 29 yards.
Three catches for 21. Yeah.
Yeah. And then you've got, Hufanga had 9 tackles in the first half and forced the fumble, and Brandon Jones recovered it. And
Jaquan.
And Jaquan, and then they bring Barron in and he plays 21. Like it just sort of like, it just goes on in their secondary, and they'll face more potent attacks obviously than Tennessee.
Yep.
But it's a group that it's going to be awfully hard for virtually every team in the league to operate against them this year.
Yeah. I'm curious. What do you think, Jahdae Barron, 21 snaps, like obviously spent kind of a majority of the looks that he did get in dime, especially in third and long situations, and then had a couple possessions where he kind of rotated in at nickel for Jaquan. I don't think he played an outside snap. I was looking at the PFF. Do you think I could see him getting up to 30 snaps, somewhere between 30 and 40 snaps, kind of as these weeks progress. But it seems like right now, it seems like right now Jaquan McMillan is a pretty strong hold on the nickel job, and that's not changing unless there's a drastic, fall off. And right now, Jahdae Barron is a rotational guy, which is a luxury. Like it might not make Broncos fans happy that your first round pick is just kind of, but it's still an asset.
Oh, definitely. And also like the season there's 17 weeks left in the season. Like someone is going to get hurt. Like it's just a reality in the NFL.
But everything's important right now.
Right now.
Parker.
Yeah, right now. Actually I'm interested. Like I want to watch Barron's reps a little bit more closely this afternoon, because he got up to 21 defensive snaps, which, I think this sort of speaks to one of many luxuries that Vance Joseph has this year, which is that you can play dime without being quite as exposed, like run game wise or in the box, as like most teams are when they play that sort of thing, because Riley Moss is physical on the edge and willing and eager to mix it up. Your safeties are really, really good tacklers. Although Brandon Jones played well. He missed a couple tackles, which obviously happens. But like, if you're looking for something that wasn't great, they did get a little loose tackling here and there, Brandon Jones in particular. But like, they could play nickel. They can play, they could play dime with 4 corners if they wanted to. They don't have to right now. They can actually probably make up a little bit of the Greenlaw absence coverage wise, like with Barron and Jaquan, and just the way that those two guys play, because they're both good tacklers. And so like they have a lot of, like, Vance Joseph just has a lot of avenues to sort of put the puzzle together overall. I am interested. Like, I don't know that I've ever heard Sean Payton be as complimentary of Jaquan McMillan as he was this morning. I think what he calls play outstanding. So we think we have an outstanding nickel. So like, I find it a little bit funny, and I know first round picks, fans want to play and all that, but there is this sense of, for the better part of the last 2 seasons, a lot of people have said, how come McMillan doesn't get the attention he deserves? He should have been a Pro Bowler. He should be, considered one of the best nickels in the game. And then Barron shows up, and now it's, well, how come this guy can't get on the field? Well, if you think McMillan's one of the best nickels in football, then that's why, and so the fact that to me, it's like the fact that Barron played 21 snaps and that you're sort of forcing the issue to figure out ways to get him in games and get him exposure speaks pretty highly of where they think he is so early in his career. That would be my read on it.
Yeah, I think it speaks better and to your point earlier, there was a goal line snap, I remember, or at least when they're, backed up, when Stranad comes out of the game and Jahdae comes in, in a dime look. And in that situation, if Dre Greenlaw was healthy, maybe he stays on the field there because of what he can do in coverage. But, I don't think, like, in a situation like that, you don't lose a ton of size or tackling physicality by cycling in Jahdae Barron, because that's one of his strengths. And so he gives, like you said, Vance Joseph just a lot of options right there, especially as they're missing a guy who's really good in coverage right now. So yeah, I would tend to agree with you that, if a guy is getting 21 snaps on this loaded of a defense, it probably speaks to more of him and the defense in general at large. Like, shoot, I don't know where you want to put Jaquan McMillan in the hierarchy of like nickels in the league, top 5, top 10, what have you. But if Jahdae Barron can't beat that out right now, that's probably fine.
Yeah.
So another thing I wanted to touch on before we go here, obviously we don't know what Evan Ingram's status is, but 31-year-old guy, tight end, injury history, to have a calf issue, be hobbling around like he did, does not bode well. Obviously, it's, we have no idea his status. It could be minor, but given kind of how they've slow played Dre Greenlaw, you have to imagine that they'll be really conservative with him. And to me, I almost wonder if, just in terms of like the sheer role that Evan Ingram plays, if he's any kind of extended absence, if maybe you see a little bit more Pat Bryant, just in terms of kind of the over the middle type of guy, safety valve, like, I almost kind of, I see that developing. But what's your read kind of on that and where they're at with? Obviously, we don't really know anything with Evan Ingram right now, but just in terms of the possibilities.
It's a great point on Pat Bryant. I thought it was interesting. Sean this morning on the conference call got asked about Barron and McMillan in that picture at nickel, and he lumped Pat Bryant in with Jahdae Barron in terms of, the balance, as we call it, a balance of knowing that you have other options and also seemingly wanting to get those guys on the field. Pat Bryant, I think, only played 3 or 4 snaps offensively.
Yeah, and one Sean Payton calling card is if he's just randomly bringing up like a receiver or a guy's name, like you saw it with Troy Franklin a lot this offseason. Like if he's just randomly bringing a guy up, like, that should set off the
he got the numbers. He got the numbers this morning and he looked at it and said, I don't like the fact that Pat Bryant played 3 snaps. Like that's what that said on the call this morning.
And also the fact that Trent Sherfield, like, he had a couple penalties, was not his best game.
He did. Yeah, the first holding call was legit. The second one was terrible. The second one on the edge was not a
That's
hold.
True. That's true.
But he did. I mean, 2 penalties. I think you're right about, like, if you have to sort of, like, move the pieces around a little bit, if Evan Ingram misses time, I think Pat Bryant is a good candidate to be a beneficiary of that. The thing with Ingram is it looked bad when it happened. Like when he came off the field after that 3rd and 8 conversion, he was clearly concerned about it. He went in the tent and then he came out pretty quick.
Like right away. Yeah.
And he had his helmet and he went back in the game. It was a long, it was sort of it was like a weird stretch. That was like midway through the 3rd quarter. He played 1 snap, like sort of midway through the 4th quarter, and then was back in the tent after that. And so I think if you were dreaming up a best case scenario, it's that it cramped up on him. And that's why you could see him kind of like stomping on the ground, and like it seemed like maybe he was trying to get it to loosen up. Don't know that. And I don't even want that to sound like speculation. That would just be the best case scenario if it was cramping. If it's any kind of strain, or more substantial injury, calf, you always you always have the sort of Achilles thing in the back of your mind when it's a calf. Obviously, he went back in the game, so it just is. It's one of those where Greenlaw has already missed a lot of time and is one of their sort of veteran additions. We've actually done a lot of reporting on calf injuries the last week because of Malcolm Roach being put on injured reserve with a calf injury. So, calves are finicky, and obviously. Evan Ingram's a guy that takes great care of himself, but if it's a strain or anything like that, it's hard to imagine that there wouldn't be some missed time, but we obviously don't know that it's a strain. So.
Yeah, I think, to to me, that's almost, I think you have the luxury of, Justin Strnad played really well yesterday in relief, and you're going up against a Colts team that's like Daniel Jones looked really good, but you're not necessarily, and Tyler Warren's good too, but you're not necessarily worried about as much about getting beat over the middle of the field consistently in the pass game. But like come week 3 against the Chargers, that becomes a little bit more dire. But I think you can certainly slow play Dre Greenlaw a little bit more than, ideally you would like to have with Evan Ingram, just in general, considering that this offense clearly needs to get more on the same page. So that'll be an interesting one to monitor this week for sure.
Yeah, it will be. I think other than that, they came out pretty clean other than that. So, that was good news, especially after, having 2 key guys in Roach. And someone said to me, Roach what's the big deal, backup lineman? But last year he played more snaps than DJ Jones and virtually as many as John Franklin Myers. So if you really want to go in the weeds, even as a last point here, even though they were down Malcolm Roach, they still got, they still felt good about putting Jordan Jackson and Annie Uwazurike in the game. Zach Allen always plays the most snaps out of everybody on the defensive line. He was at 81%, which obviously is a lot, but he only had 3 games where he played less than that last year. So even it felt like, I think they were in the mid to high teens for Jackson and Uwazurike, but they felt good about putting those guys in. And there seems like there's a concerted effort to not, even in a game where you only play 57 defensive snaps, to make sure that your top line guys are getting some rest. So I would imagine that'll continue. They thought they were pretty heavy especially on Zach Allen, and then Nick Bonito and a couple other guys last year. So I'd imagine that'll continue. Good stuff overall, obviously from that group. And that just sort of tells you how deep this group is. Like you lose Malcolm Roach and you just, roll along and give up 133 yards in the opener without him.
Yeah, could be worse. And you feel fine, you take 5 defensive linemen like normal. You don't even have to elevate anyone. Sabian Jones is still inactive. So yeah, so much depth there.
Yep. All right. Well, let's leave it there. We'll be back on Friday. We're haggling. We're working through the technological issues. We're trying to figure out how to get this live thing going. If not, it'll be a normal podcast sort of previewing week 2 at Indianapolis. Either way, we'll be back on Friday. Hopefully it will be in a scenario where we can get people involved and have them ask questions and chop it up that way. If not, we'll talk to you anyways on Friday. And until then, check out denverpost.com/Broncos for all the latest, a ton of stuff coming out of the game. And then obviously more as we get into week 2 here. We're off and running. That's Luca. I'm Parker. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Talk to you on Friday.